The crystal towers of Velthara Prime stretched toward the three suns that lit the morning sky. Inside the great council chamber, beings from across the galaxy sat in their floating meditation pods. The air hummed with translation devices working to convert hundreds of different languages into something everyone could understand. Admiral Kexthar of the Veltharan Defense Force stood at the center of the room, his blue skin glowing softly under the lights. His forearms moved as he spoke, pointing to the massive holographic display that showed a small blue planet far away on the edge of known space. The planet was called Earth by its people. The beings who lived there called themselves humans. They had just learned how to travel faster than light, which meant they could now reach other star systems. This was always an important moment for any species. It meant they were ready to meet the greater galaxy. Most species took thousands of years to reach this point. Some never made it at all, but these humans had done something unusual. They had gone from basic spaceflight to faster-than-light travel in less than 100 years. Admiral Kexthar had been watching Earth for several years now. His job was to keep track of new species that might join the Galactic Council. The humans showed promise. They were curious about everything. They solved problems in ways that surprised him. They never seemed to give up, even when things looked impossible. But there was something else about them that made him nervous, though he could not say what it was. The other council members were talking among themselves about whether to make contact with the humans. Most seemed excited about the idea. New species always brought fresh ideas and new ways of thinking. Trade was good for everyone. The humans had already shown they could work together to solve big problems on their own planet. They seemed like they would fit in well with the galactic community. Then something happened that made everyone stop talking. A section of the chamber that had been empty for decades began to glow. The air shimmered and twisted. Slowly, a figure began to appear. It was Elder Zontalith of the Zarkani people. She had not been seen in the council chamber for over 50 years. Her body was made of what looked like living light, pale and see-through. She was very old, even by the standards of her people who could live for thousands of years. The Zarkani had once ruled a huge part of the galaxy. They had been powerful beyond imagination. Then, without warning, they had given up their empire and disappeared into deep space. No one knew why. Elder Zontalith was one of the few who still sometimes spoke to other species. When she appeared, everyone listened. Her voice was like distant thunder, deep and echoing. "Council members," she said, her form flickering like a candle in the wind. "You speak of making contact with the humans. You do not know what you are about to do. In the deepest vaults of our archives, buried beneath layers of security that have kept them hidden for 12,000 years, there are records. Records of a species that once brought terror to every corner of this galaxy. They called themselves humans." The chamber erupted in noise. Beings shouted questions and protests in dozens of languages. The translation devices struggled to keep up. Admiral Kexthar raised his hands for silence, but it took several minutes for the room to calm down. Councillor Mexara of the Silthan hegemony was the first to speak. His people were proud warriors who had never lost a battle. His voice was full of disbelief. "Elder Zontalith, with respect, this is impossible. Our historians have studied the ancient records. There is no mention of any species called humans having an empire 12,000 years ago. The beings on that planet have barely left their home system. They fight wars with chemical explosives and metal projectiles. They have not even learned to properly harness the power of their star." Elder Zontaleth's form grew brighter, and her voice became harder. "Councillor Mexara, your people have existed for only 8,000 years. The Terran Empire rose and fell before your species learned to make fire. The records exist because my people were there. We fought them. We watched them grow from a single world to rulers of half the galaxy. We saw what they could do when they decided something needed to be done." She gestured, and the air above the council chamber filled with images. They were old and faded, but they showed massive fleets of ships unlike anything the current council had ever seen. The ships moved in perfect formation, striking targets with impossible precision. Worlds that had been green and living were shown stripped bare, their resources taken to fuel an ever-growing war machine. "They were not evil," Elder Zontalith continued. "That is what made them so dangerous. They believed they were protecting the galaxy from threats that came from beyond our borders, dark things that lived in the spaces between stars, ancient enemies that wanted to consume all life. The humans decided that the only way to fight such enemies was to unite the entire galaxy under their rule. The images changed, showing battles between human fleets and things that hurt to look at, creatures of shadow and void that seemed to eat light itself. The humans fought them with weapons that bent space and time. They won, but the cost was terrible. Entire star systems were destroyed in the fighting. Billions died. When the threat was finally defeated, the humans looked at what they had become. They had saved the galaxy, but they had also conquered it. Every species lived under human rule. Every world served the human war machine. They realized they had become the very thing they had fought to destroy. So they made a choice that no other conquering species has ever made. They gave it all up. The council chamber was completely silent now. Even the translation devices seemed to have stopped humming. Elder Zontaleth's form was growing fainter, as if telling this story was using up her strength. The humans scattered themselves across the void. They sent colony ships to distant galaxies. They erased their own records so that future generations would not be tempted to rebuild their empire. They left behind only small groups on distant worlds, people who would forget their heritage and start fresh. We thought they were gone forever. Admiral Kexthar found his voice. Elder, are you saying that the humans on Earth are descendants of this ancient empire? That seems impossible. They show no signs of advanced technology. They have no memories of being anything other than what they are now. Elder Zontaleth turned her ancient gaze on him. Admiral, what do you know about human nature? Have you studied how they solve problems? How they react when challenged? How they never ever give up? She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. They adapt, Admiral. It is what they do. They learn, they grow. They become whatever they need to become to survive and protect what they care about. Counselor Velcaris of the Hegemony stood up. His species valued strength above all else. Even if this story is true, Elder, these modern humans are not their ancestors. They are weak. They fight with primitive weapons. They cannot even agree among themselves about simple things. What threat could they possibly pose to civilizations that have mastered dark matter and quantum consciousness? Elder Zontaleth's laugh was like wind through empty space, cold and endless. Counselor, you mistake restraint for weakness. You see division where there is actually careful preparation. Tell me, in all your studies of these humans, have you ever seen them face an external threat to their entire species? Have you seen what happens when they stop fighting each other and start fighting together? The council members looked at each other uncertainly. It was true that most human conflicts seemed to be between different groups of humans. When faced with natural disasters or other challenges that threatened everyone, they did seem to work together remarkably well. I have watched them for decades, Elder Zontaleth said. I have seen them solve problems that should have taken centuries in mere years. I have seen them develop technologies that our scientists said were impossible. They do it by thinking in ways that no other species thinks. They break rules that the rest of us do not even know exist. She moved closer to the center of the chamber, her light growing brighter one last time. Mark my words, council members. If you invite these humans into our galaxy, within a generation they will surpass technologies it took us millennia to develop. Within a century they will be the dominant power in known space, not because they conquered us, but because we will have asked them to save us from problems we cannot solve ourselves. The elder's form began to fade. The choice is yours to make. But remember this warning when you wonder how everything changed so quickly. The humans are not coming back as conquerors. They are coming back as the galaxy's caretakers. The question is whether you will be their partners or their subjects. With those words, Elder Zontaleth disappeared, leaving behind only empty air and confused council members. The debate that followed lasted for hours. Some believed her warning. Others dismissed it as the fears of an ancient being who had lived too long and seen too much. In the end, the vote was close, but the decision was made. They would make contact with the humans. After all, what harm could it do to simply talk? The neutral meeting station hung in space between two pulsing stars. It was built specifically for moments like this when species met for the first time. The station was huge, big enough to hold thousands of beings from different worlds. Every section was designed to support different types of life. Some areas had thick atmosphere for beings who breathed heavy gases. Others had no atmosphere at all for species that lived in vacuum. Water-filled chambers floated next to sections with crushing gravity. Captain Jake Morrison stood at the airlock of his ship, the Horizon's Edge. He was a tall man with gray hair and steady eyes. He had served in Earth's military for 20 years before becoming a diplomat. Next to him stood Dr. Lisa Harper, a woman with bright red hair who studied alien life. She carried a bag full of instruments that could analyze any form of life they might encounter. Behind them was Commander Cole Rivera, their security chief. He was quiet and watchful, always looking for potential threats. The three humans had trained for this moment for years. They knew they were representing not just Earth, but all of humanity. Everything they said and did would shape how the galaxy saw their species. The weight of that responsibility was heavy, but they were ready. The airlock opened with a soft hiss. Beyond it was a corridor that seemed to stretch forever. The walls were made of some kind of crystal that glowed with soft light. The floor felt solid under their feet, but they could see through it to chambers below where alien beings moved about their business. The sight was overwhelming, but the humans kept walking. Their guide was a being called Coordinator Thexali. She looked like a tall, thin tree made of silver metal. Her voice came from speakers built into the walls around them. She spoke perfect English, which surprised the humans until she explained that the station had been monitoring Earth's broadcasts for decades to learn their language. "Welcome to Kepler Station," Coordinator Thexali said as they walked. This facility was built over 300 years ago as a place where new species could meet the galactic community safely. "We have hosted first contact meetings for over 40 different species. You humans are the 41st. Dr. Harper was fascinated by everything she saw. Strange creatures floated past them in the corridors. Some looked like living clouds of gas. Others were clearly mechanical, though whether they were robots or a form of artificial life was unclear. A few looked almost human except for small differences like extra arms or different colored skin. How many different species are part of the Galactic Council?" Captain Morrison asked. "Currently, there are 173 member species," Coordinator Thexali replied. "Some are very old civilizations that have been exploring space for millions of years. Others are relatively new like yourselves. Each brings something unique to our community." They entered a vast chamber where representatives from dozens of different species were waiting. The humans had studied recordings of some of these beings, but seeing them in person was different. Admiral Kexthar was there, his blue skin glowing softly in the station's light. His forearms moved gracefully as he gestured to other council members. Counselor Mexara of the Siltan hegemony was impressive to look at. He stood nearly 3 meters tall with thick arms and legs that looked like they could crush stone. His people were warriors, and it showed in the way he carried himself. When he spoke, his voice was deep and commanding. "So these are the humans," Counselor Mexara said, looking down at them. "You are smaller than I expected. Your ships are primitive. Your weapons are chemical-based. What exactly do you think you can offer the galactic community?" Captain Morrison stepped forward without fear. "Counselor Mexara, we may be new to space travel, but we are not new to solving problems. We offer fresh perspectives. We offer the willingness to learn. And we offer something that might be rarer than advanced technology. We offer hope." Several council members made sounds that the translation devices interpreted as laughter. But Admiral Kexthar raised a hand for silence. "Captain Morrison, could you explain what you mean by hope?" "On our world, we have faced many challenges that seemed impossible to solve," Morrison said. "Wars that threatened to destroy us. Diseases that killed millions. Natural disasters that could have ended our civilization. Each time we found a way through. Not because we had the best technology, but because we refused to give up. We believe that any problem can be solved if you are willing to try long enough and hard enough." The council members looked at each other with interest. This was not the usual speech they heard from new species. Most talked about their achievements or asked for advanced technology. These humans were talking about something much more basic. Over the next several days, the humans were given a series of tests. These were problems that new species were traditionally asked to solve to show their level of development. The first test was a puzzle involving quantum mathematics. Most species took weeks to solve it. Dr. Harper solved it in 6 hours by approaching it from an angle that no one had tried before. The second test was a diplomatic challenge. 2 artificial species had been programmed to have an argument that had no solution. The goal was to see how the humans would handle an impossible situation. Captain Morrison spent 3 days talking to both sides. He did not solve their argument, but he found a way for them to argue productively instead of destructively. The council had never seen anything like it. The third test was given to Commander Rivera. He was asked to review the station's security and suggest improvements. This was usually a simple exercise that showed how well a species understood defensive thinking. Rivera spent 2 days studying everything he could about the station. When he gave his report, the council was shocked. "Your security is very good against direct attacks," Rivera said, "but you have 17 major weaknesses that could be exploited by someone who thinks differently about warfare. Your sensors are designed to detect ships and weapons, but they would not notice small groups moving through the maintenance tunnels. Your power grid has backup systems, but they all depend on the same control center. Your communication networks are encrypted, but they use the same key rotation pattern for everything." He went on for nearly an hour, describing vulnerabilities that the station's architects had never considered. More importantly, he offered solutions for each problem, simple changes that would make the station much more secure without requiring major construction. That evening, the council members met privately to discuss what they had seen. Admiral Kexthar spoke first. "These humans are remarkable. They approach every problem as if the rules do not apply to them. It is not that they break the rules, but they seem to see possibilities that we miss." Councillor Mexara was less impressed. "They are clever, I will grant you that. But cleverness is not the same as wisdom. They are still primitive. Give them a few hundred years to develop properly, and then we can see what they are truly capable of." The debate continued for hours. In the end, the council voted to grant humanity provisional membership in the galactic community. They would be given access to basic technologies like improved power generation and faster communication systems. They would be invited to send observers to council meetings, and they would be allowed to establish trade relationships with other member species. Captain Morrison accepted the offer gracefully. "We are honored by your trust," he said. "We promise to use these gifts wisely and to contribute whatever we can to the galactic community." As the humans prepared to leave the station, Coordinator Thexali approached them privately. "Captain Morrison, I have been watching first contact meetings for over a century. I have never seen anything like what your people did here. Most species either ask for help or try to prove their superiority. You did neither. You simply showed who you are." "What we are is what we have always been," Morrison replied. "People who solve problems and try to help where we can. We do not see any reason to change that just because we are in space now." As the horizon's edge departed from Kepler Station, the three humans looked back at the massive structure through their ship's windows. They had succeeded in their mission. Humanity was now part of something bigger than itself, but they could not shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger than any of them could imagine. 50 years had passed since Captain Morrison first walked through the halls of Kepler Station. The galaxy was a very different place now, though most beings did not yet understand just how different it had become. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in the control center of New Geneva Station, humanity's first major deep space construction project. Through the massive viewing windows, she could see ships coming and going from dozens of different worlds. New Geneva Station should not have existed. When the humans first proposed building it, the Galactic Council's engineers said it was impossible. The design violated 3 major principles of space construction that had been proven correct for thousands of years. The humans had combined alien technologies in ways that no one had tried before. They used materials that should not have worked together. They built systems that should have failed within days. Instead, New Geneva Station was the most efficient space facility anyone had ever seen. Ships could dock and undock faster than at any other station in the galaxy. The living quarters were more comfortable than luxury hotels on most worlds. The manufacturing sections could build almost anything using raw materials from nearby asteroids. Most importantly, the station could modify itself. When new needs arose, the humans simply reconfigured the existing systems instead of building new ones. Dr. Rodriguez had been part of the design team. She was now one of the leading experts on hybrid technology, the art of combining different alien technologies in new ways. Her office was filled with devices that should not have worked. A Zilthan gravity generator powered by Korthak energy crystals, a Veltharan communication array that used human quantum computers for processing. Each device was more efficient than anything either species had built alone. A soft chime indicated someone was at her door. "Come in," she called. Admiral Sam Torres entered, carrying a data pad and wearing the worried expression that had become common among human military officers lately. Torres was the grandson of a fighter pilot who had defended Earth during the old wars. Now he commanded humanity's space fleet, which had grown far larger than anyone had expected it to. "Elena, we need to talk," Torres said, setting down his datapad. "I just came from a meeting with the Galactic Defense Committee. They want us to slow down our ship production and submit our new designs for approval before we build them." Dr. Rodriguez frowned. Human ships were different from the massive vessels that other species built. They were smaller and faster, designed to adapt quickly to new situations. Where alien ships were built for specific missions and rarely changed, human ships could be reconfigured for different tasks in a matter of hours. The modular design made them incredibly versatile, but it also made other species nervous. "What was your response?" she asked. "I told them we would consider their request," Torres said. "But Elena, they are scared. Really scared. Our fleet is now larger than the Silthan hegemonies, and we have been building ships for only 30 years. They built theirs over centuries, it was true. Human shipyards had become incredibly efficient. They used new manufacturing techniques that built ships from the inside out instead of assembling them piece by piece. Artificial intelligences designed by Dr. Maya Chen controlled the construction process, making millions of tiny adjustments to optimize each ship for its intended purpose. What took other species months to build, humans could complete in weeks. Dr. Chen's work on artificial intelligence had been perhaps the most disturbing development for the galactic community. Most species had tried to create AI at some point in their history. Most had failed. A few had succeeded and then quickly destroyed their creations when they realized how dangerous thinking machines could be. But human AI was different. It did not try to replace human thinking. Instead, it enhanced it. Chen's AI systems could solve problems that stumped the best organic minds, but they always worked with humans rather than instead of them. They seemed to understand creativity and intuition in ways that no other artificial intelligence had ever achieved. When asked how she had accomplished this, Dr. Chen's answer was typically human. "We did not try to build minds like ours. We tried to build minds that think the way we need them to think." The results were visible everywhere humans had established colonies. On Mars, they had transformed a dead world into a garden in just 20 years using AI-designed terraforming systems. On Europa, they had built underwater cities that were completely self-sufficient. On distant worlds near the galactic rim, human colonies were thriving in environments that other species considered uninhabitable. But it was not just their technology that worried the other species. It was their medicine. Dr. Nathan Cross had revolutionized galactic healthcare by treating diseases that had been considered incurable for thousands of years. His approach was completely different from traditional galactic medicine. Where other species focused on understanding the disease, humans focused on understanding the patient. Cross had developed treatments that attacked problems from multiple directions at once. Instead of using one drug or one therapy, he used combinations that worked together in ways that no one had tried before. His success rate was so high that beings from across the galaxy were coming to human hospitals for treatment. The medical colleges on a dozen worlds were sending their best students to study human techniques. Admiral Torres sat down heavily in the chair across from Dr. Rodriguez's desk. "Elena, do you ever think we are moving too fast? Maybe the council is right. Maybe we should slow down and make sure we are not making mistakes." Rodriguez considered the question carefully. "Sam, we are not moving fast because we want to. We are moving fast because that is what the problems require. The galaxy faces challenges that cannot wait for committees to approve solutions. Climate disasters on dozens of worlds, plagues that spread between star systems, trade disputes that could become wars. We solve these problems because someone needs to solve them." She gestured toward the window where a human medical ship was docking. It was carrying supplies to treat a plague on Rilthan Prime, a world on the far side of the galaxy. The local government had tried to handle the crisis alone for 2 years before finally asking for help. Human doctors and AI systems had developed a cure in 6 months. The council members see our rapid development as a threat, Rodriguez continued. But what they do not understand is that we are not developing for ourselves. We are developing for everyone. Every new technology we create, we share. Every problem we solve, we teach others how to solve it too. This was true. Humans had shared their agricultural techniques with dozens of worlds, ending famines that had lasted for centuries. They had given their water purification technology to desert planets, making life possible where it had never existed before. They had taught their construction methods to species whose cities were falling apart, helping them build better homes for their people. But some species were beginning to wonder if there was a price for all this help. Human colonies were appearing throughout the galaxy, always in places where they could be most useful. Human traders were establishing relationships with local governments, offering solutions to problems that had existed for generations. Human diplomats were mediating disputes between species that had been enemies for millennia. The humans always asked for very little in return: permission to establish small research stations, access to local mineral deposits, the right to build communication relays. Each request seemed reasonable by itself, but when viewed together, they formed a pattern that made some council members nervous. Admiral Torres stood up and walked to the window. "Elena, there is something else. Our intelligence division has detected increased Galactic Council surveillance of human activities. They are watching us much more closely than they watch other species. Captain Alex Stone thinks they are preparing for something." Captain Stone was the head of human intelligence operations. She was a quiet woman who rarely spoke, but when she did, people listened. If she thought the council was preparing for something, it was worth taking seriously. "What kind of preparation?" Rodriguez asked. "Stone thinks they might try to limit our expansion, maybe demand that we submit to more oversight, possibly even restrict our access to certain technologies or star systems. They see us as growing too powerful too quickly." Rodriguez nodded slowly. It was not unexpected. Throughout galactic history, established powers had always been suspicious of rising ones. The difference was that humans had never tried to challenge the existing order. They had simply worked within it so effectively that they had changed it without meaning to. "Sam, what would happen if they tried to restrict us? Would we comply?" Torres was quiet for a long moment. "That would depend on what they asked us to stop doing. If they asked us to stop helping people, to stop solving problems, to stop being who we are, I do not think humanity would accept that. We have never been good at being told we cannot help when help is needed." Far away in the deepest archives of the Zarkani homeworld, Elder Zontalith stirred from her long meditation. She had been watching the humans' progress with growing concern. Everything was happening exactly as she had predicted 50 years ago. The humans were not conquering the galaxy. They were becoming indispensable to it, and that, she knew, was far more dangerous. The first shot of what would later be called the Human War was fired on a small planet called Kepler 442b. It was not much to look at, just a rocky world with thin atmosphere and barely enough water to support life. But 3,000 human colonists had made it their home. They had built farms in the valleys and mining operations in the mountains. They had schools for their children and hospitals for their sick. It was a quiet place where people worked hard and helped each other. The Silthan hegemony claimed the planet belonged to them. They said their star charts showed it was in Silthan space, even though no Silthan had ever set foot on it. The humans disagreed. They had been living there for 15 years. They had transformed a dead world into a living one. Under galactic law, that gave them the right to stay. For months, diplomats from both sides tried to find a solution. The humans offered to share the planet. They proposed joint mining operations and cultural exchanges. They suggested that both species could benefit from working together. But Hegemon Velcaris was not interested in compromise. He saw the humans as weak newcomers who needed to learn their place in the galactic order. Velcaris had been watching human expansion with growing anger. In his view, these primitive beings had been given too much too quickly. They had been granted technologies and rights that his people had taken centuries to earn. Now they had the audacity to claim Silthan territory. It was time to remind them that strength, not cleverness, ruled the galaxy. The attack came without warning. A Silthan battle group dropped out of hyperspace above Kepler 442b at dawn on a Tuesday morning. The colonists were beginning their daily work when the first energy beams struck their settlement. The weapons were designed to destroy buildings, not kill people, but the humans had only minutes to evacuate. Most of the colonists made it to the emergency shelters in time. But the hospital was hit while doctors were performing surgery. The school was destroyed while children were in class. When the bombardment ended, 3,047 humans were dead. Men, women, and children who had never hurt anyone, who had spent their lives building something beautiful on a world that had been empty. The news reached Earth within hours. President Diana Foster was in a cabinet meeting when her aide handed her the emergency communication. She read it twice, her face growing pale. Then she set the message down and looked around the table at her advisors. "Ladies and gentlemen, she said quietly. The Silthan hegemony has just declared war on humanity. They may not have meant to, but that is what they have done. The question now is how we respond. The debate that followed was intense but brief. Some argued for diplomatic protests. Others suggested economic sanctions. But General Kate Sullivan, the veteran who commanded Earth's defense forces, had a different proposal. Madam President, Sullivan said, with respect, this is not a time for diplomatic messages. The Silthans have killed our people to make a point about power. If we respond with anything less than overwhelming force, every species in the galaxy will think they can do the same thing. We need to show them that attacking humans has consequences. President Foster studied the general's face. Sullivan was not a warmonger. She was a careful, thoughtful woman who had spent her career trying to avoid conflicts. If she was recommending military action, the situation was as serious as it seemed. General, what exactly are you proposing? Complete neutralization of the Silthan Third Fleet, Sullivan replied without hesitation. The ships that attacked our colony, plus their support vessels. We disable them, capture their crews, and hold them until the hegemony agrees to withdraw from all human territories and pay reparations for the attack. The Secretary of Defense looked shocked. General, the Third Fleet has over 400 ships. Our entire space navy has less than 200. How could we possibly neutralize a force that large? General Sullivan smiled grimly. Sir, with respect, you are thinking like the Galactic Council thinks. Big fleets, big battles, big explosions. That is not how humans fight wars. We have been preparing for this possibility since the day we joined the galactic community. Colonel Marcus Reed's special operations teams are already in position. President Foster authorized the operation that afternoon. The order went out on encrypted channels to human ships scattered throughout the galaxy. Not warships, but trade vessels and research ships and passenger transports. Ships that had been moving innocently through space for years, ignored by everyone because they looked harmless. The Silthan Third Fleet was gathered near their homeworld, celebrating their easy victory over the human colonists. Admiral Grexhan was hosting a reception for his officers when the first reports came in. Ships were going dark across his fleet, not destroyed, just suddenly silent. At first, he thought it was a communication malfunction, but when he tried to contact the affected ships directly, he got no response. Their engines were still running. Their life support was still functioning, but their weapons were offline, their shields were down, and their crews were not responding to any signals. The pattern was terrifying in its precision. One by one, every ship in the Third Fleet simply stopped working. Their computers displayed messages in perfect Silthan. Your vessel has been disabled by human forces. Your crew is unharmed. You will be released when your government agrees to withdraw from human territory. Do not attempt to restore your systems. Doing so will be considered an act of aggression. It took 72 hours for the entire Third Fleet to be neutralized. 437 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, reduced to floating hulks by an enemy they never saw coming. The few officers who managed to get emergency messages out described the same thing. Small human ships appearing from nowhere, doing something to their systems, and then vanishing before they could be targeted. Colonel Reed's forces had used tactics that no one in the galaxy understood. Human ships had approached the Silthan Fleet hidden in the sensor shadows of asteroids and space debris. They had used new stealth technologies that made them invisible to conventional detection. They had deployed AI-controlled drones that could hack into alien computer systems and disable them from the inside. But most importantly, they had used knowledge. For 50 years, humans had been trading with galactic species, learning about their technologies, studying their strengths and weaknesses. Every ship design, every weapon system, every defensive protocol had been carefully analyzed. When the time came to act, the humans knew exactly how to neutralize each threat. The message that Colonel Reed sent to the Silthan High Command was simple and direct. Your Third Fleet has been disabled. Your crews are alive and unharmed. They will be returned to you when you withdraw all Silthan forces from human territory and provide compensation for the civilians killed on Kepler 442b. This is your only warning. Any further attacks on human colonies will result in the complete neutralization of your military forces. The Galactic Council met an emergency session within hours of receiving reports of the incident. No one knew what to make of it. The humans had just defeated the second most powerful military force in the galaxy without firing a shot. They had demonstrated capabilities that no one knew they possessed. Admiral Kexthar spoke for many when he said, "This changes everything. We thought we understood human capabilities. We thought they were peaceful because they were weak. Now we know they were peaceful by choice. The question is, what else do we not know about them?" The answer to that question came from Captain Alex Stone, speaking on behalf of the human government via quantum communication link. Her words were broadcast to every member of the Galactic Council and recorded for history. "Council members, for 50 years we have worked with you as partners and friends. We have shared our knowledge, solved problems together, and built a better galaxy for all species. We did this because we believed in cooperation and mutual respect. The Silthan attack on our colony has forced us to reveal capabilities we hoped never to use." She paused, letting her words sink in. "We want you to understand something very clearly. Every human colony, every human ship, every human citizen is under the protection of the Terran Federation.
Any attack on our people will be met with immediate and overwhelming response.
We prefer peace, but we are prepared for war. The choice of which path we take together is yours to make." In the depths of space, Elders on Talith felt the ripples of change spreading through the galaxy. The moment she had warned about 50 years ago had finally arrived. The humans had revealed their true nature, not as conquerors, but as protectors with the power to enforce their protection. The age of galactic innocence was over. The age of human dominion had begun. 6 months after the Silthan Third Fleet vanished into human custody, the galaxy looked very different. Grand Admiral Ryan Pierce stood on the bridge of the Terra's Resolve, a ship that dwarfed anything the Galactic Council had thought humans capable of building. Through the massive viewing ports, he could see the fleet assembled around him. Hundreds of ships, each one representing technologies that had been hidden for decades. The Terra's Resolve itself was a statement of human capabilities. It was not just large, it was impossible. The ship used gravitational manipulation systems that the Council's best scientists said could not exist. Its hull was made from materials that should not have been able to hold together. Its weapons could strike targets in other star systems with perfect accuracy. Most disturbing of all, it had been built in complete secrecy over the course of 20 years. Admiral Pierce was a calm man who rarely raised his voice. He had spent his career trying to avoid this moment. But the Silthan attack had forced humanity's hand. Now the galaxy would learn what humans really were, and he was not sure anyone was ready for that knowledge. Dr. Sophie Blake entered the bridge carrying a data pad filled with archaeological reports. As humanity's chief archaeologist, she had spent decades uncovering the truth about human history. What she had found in ruins across the galaxy had changed everything humans thought they knew about themselves. "Admiral, the Council Assembly is ready to receive your transmission," she said. "Are you sure you want to tell them everything?" Pierce nodded. "Sophie, we have been living a lie for 12,000 years. Our ancestors chose to forget who they were so that their children could have a fresh start. But the galaxy is facing threats that require us to remember. It is time for the truth." The holographic display activated, showing the emergency session of the Galactic Council. Every species was represented. Fear was visible on faces across dozens of different worlds. The humans had revealed military capabilities that no one had suspected. Now they were demanding an explanation from the Council about restrictions on human expansion. Admiral Pierce began speaking, his voice carrying to every corner of the galaxy. "Council members, for 50 years you have known us as a young species, eager to learn and contribute to galactic civilization. That knowledge was incomplete. Dr. Blake, please share what our archaeological teams have discovered." Dr. Blake stepped forward, her expression serious. "Council members, we have found our own ruins on over 800 worlds throughout this galaxy. Ruins of cities, spaceports, research facilities, and military bases. All built by humans, all abandoned approximately 12,000 years ago. The humans you thought you were meeting for the first time were actually coming home." The council chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted questions and accusations in dozens of languages. Translation systems struggled to keep up with the volume of communication. Admiral Kexthar, his blue skin now pale with shock, managed to restore order. "Dr. Blake," he said, his voice shaking, "are you claiming that humans previously controlled this galaxy? That the species we welcomed as newcomers were actually our former rulers returning from exile?" "Not exactly," Dr. Blake replied. "The Terran Empire never ruled the galaxy through conquest. They ruled it through protection. 12,000 years ago, this galaxy faced threats from outside our borders, things that came from the void between galaxies. entities that fed on life itself. The humans built an empire not to control other species, but to coordinate their defense against these threats. She activated her own holographic display, showing images from the archaeological sites, ancient battlefields where the laws of physics had been broken, weapons that could destroy entire star systems, ships the size of moons built for wars that lasted centuries. The war was won, Dr. Blake continued, but the cost was terrible. Entire sectors of the galaxy were destroyed in the fighting. Billions died. When it was over, the humans looked at what they had become and made a choice that no other species in galactic history had ever made. They chose to give up their power and start over. General Hank Morrison, grandson of the first human diplomat, stepped forward. His family had known the truth for generations, passed down in secret from parent to child. The Terran Empire did not fall, he said. It chose to end itself. Our ancestors scattered across the void, erasing their own history so that future generations would not be tempted to rebuild what they had destroyed. But they left safeguards, Admiral Pierce added. Hidden colonies with orders to watch and wait. Advanced technologies buried beneath the surface of distant worlds. Genetic locks that would activate if humanity ever faced extinction again. The humans you met 50 years ago were descendants of one colony ship, but they were never truly alone. As if summoned by his words, the space around the council station began to shimmer. Ships appeared from nowhere, dropping out of stealth fields that had hidden them for decades. They surrounded the station like a protective shell, their hulls bearing symbols that archaeologists now recognized as ancient Terran military markings. The Terran Federation has been rebuilding itself for 50 years, Admiral Pierce said calmly. Not through conquest, but through cooperation. Every trade agreement, every technological exchange, every problem we solved together was preparation for this moment. We have been getting ready to defend this galaxy again. Counselor Mex Ara of the Silthan hegemony, his pride broken by the defeat of his fleet, asked the question that everyone was thinking. What do you want from us? Are you here to rule us as you did before? General Morrison's answer was simple and direct. Counselor, we do not want to rule you. We want to protect you. The threats that our ancestors faced are returning. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected signs of movement in the void between galaxies. The ancient enemies are stirring again. He gestured to the holographic display, which now showed images from the furthest reaches of known space, dark shapes moving between the stars, things that absorbed light and twisted space around them. The sensors that detected them were human-built, hidden in deep space for decades. This galaxy has perhaps 50 years before they arrive in force, General Morrison continued. 50 years to prepare for a war that will make the conflicts you know look like children's games. We can face this threat together, with humans coordinating the defense as our ancestors did before, or we can face it separately and watch civilization die species by species. The council chamber fell silent. The choice he offered was not really a choice at all. Join willingly or be overwhelmed by forces beyond imagination. Some species began transmitting their acceptance immediately. Others, too proud to admit they needed protection, prepared for resistance they knew they could not win. In the deepest archives of the Zarkani homeworld, Elder Zon Talith used the last of her strength to send one final message across all galactic frequencies. Her form was barely visible now, more memory than substance, but her words carried the weight of 12,000 years of knowledge. To those who come after, remember this day. The galaxy had 12,000 years to grow strong without human guidance. 12,000 years to prepare for the threats that we knew would return. Instead, we fought among ourselves and grew weak. Now the humans have returned not as conquerors, but as our only hope for survival. We were warned. We knew the signs. We ignored them all. Her form began to dissolve into light. The humans offered us partnership as equals 50 years ago. We could have learned from them, grown with them, faced the future together as allies. Instead, we treated them as students and ourselves as teachers. Now they return as guardians, and we have become their charges. Admiral Sarah Mitchell stood in the command center of humanity's new galactic capital, a massive station built in the hidden years when the galaxy thought humans were still learning. Around her, officers coordinated the integration of hundreds of species into a unified defense network. It was the same work their ancestors had done 12,000 years ago, but this time they hoped to do it better. Admiral, her aide asked, do you think they understand what is coming? Mitchell looked out at the stars where human ships were taking positions around every inhabited world in the galaxy. Lieutenant, they will understand when they need to. For now, it is enough that they trust us to protect them. Our ancestors made the mistake of conquering to save. We will try a different approach. She activated the Galactic Communication Network, sending a message to every world, every ship, every outpost in known space. This is Admiral Mitchell of the Terran Federation. As of today, this galaxy is under human protection. Not human rule, not human conquest, but human protection. We will defend every world, every species, every life that calls this galaxy home. To potential enemies beyond our borders, approach with peaceful intent, or not at all. This galaxy has learned from its mistakes. We will not be caught unprepared again, and to our galactic family, we are home now. Together we will face whatever comes from the darkness between the stars. The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of thought, carried by communication networks that humans had been secretly building for decades. On 1,000 worlds, beings looked up at the stars and realized that everything had changed. The age of independence was over. The age of unity had begun. And somewhere in the void